Hello YouTube and welcome to an all new Elder Scrolls lore video. Today we'll be talking about the city of Kvatch, specifically what happened to it after the Oblivion crisis. Now most of this video will be speculation, as we've only got a few clues to go on, so if you don't like speculation all too much I recommend you maybe not watch this video, but if you do, bear with me and we'll get to it. I speculate mostly within the existing context that we do have, so it may be interesting nonetheless. Anyway, let's get on with the video. Now, as most of you know, the city of Kvatch was the first major victim on Tamriel of the Oblivion crisis. The city was almost completely destroyed during the attack by Mehrunes Dagon's forces, which tried to overrun the city. During our time of gameplay in Oblivion, the city never really gets repaired, something which presumably only happens after the events of the game, as many of its citizens expressed that they at least would like to see the city to be restored, saying that the city is their home and that they don't really want to leave. In addition to that, we know that after the death of Ormelius Goldwine, the Count of Kvatch at the time, his signet ring, his symbol of office of the Count of Kvatch, was preserved by the city of Kvatch's guard in order to have it be given to the new Count. So we know that at least what remained of the city guard at that point planned to bring a new Count in order to help with the rebuilding of the city. But the rebuilding process couldn't possibly have been easy, since in the direct aftermath of the Oblivion crisis, Cyrodiil and the Empire itself as a whole were in a deep crisis, having to restore itself from the damages done by the forces of Oblivion. And after the assassination of Potentate Oketo, the leader of what remained of the Empire then, the Empire fell into pure chaos with many of Cyrodiil's counties, most notably Bravil and Leowin, becoming independent and throwing themselves into civil war against one another and against what remained of the Empire. Central rule at this stage was almost completely fully absent, with several petty warlords squabbling over the throne of the Empire in the Imperial city, as the Empire itself fell apart around them. Now, something that we know for sure past this point is that Kvatch indeed get repaired at some stage in time, as we know that during the Great War, which was 170 years after the Oblivion crisis, the city still existed and people presumably still lived there. Which was, again, more than 170 years after the Oblivion crisis, so we're sure that at some point in time the city got repaired. But it's very fun to still speculate on Kvatch's fate, based on the wider context of Cyrodiil during this time that we do have, mainly from the Elder Scrolls novels. Because I speculate that during this time, directly after the Oblivion crisis, resources would have been scarce, meaning that the people of Kvatch would have likely had to rebuild with whatever they could get their hands on, likely leading to the city being basically a collection of buildings built out of cheap and easy to get building materials, as the market for good building materials would have been very bad in these years. Since directly after the Oblivion crisis, counties with more money, like for example Leowin or Chedenal or Coral, would have likely bought up the best materials available, as they too had damages and need to repair after the crisis, leaving ruined places like Kvatch with basically what's the table scraps of the building materials. Since the central Imperial authority was waning during this period and was more concerned with trying to keep the provinces together than likely local repairs, meant that there also wasn't really a lot of central help that Kvatch would have relied on during this point. And when the Imperial authority completely collapsed around 10 years after the Oblivion crisis, infighting in the form of small civil wars and general political fracturing took place in Cyrodiil, meaning that again, there was very little help for Kvatch. So I think that Kvatch during this time was still a very poor place, likely simply a collection of mismatched cheap buildings within the existing damaged walls, which they probably wouldn't have the money to repair yet. Perhaps the city may have lost even more people during this time, as we know that during this period a lot of new villages and towns were founded around Cyrodiil, all partially founded by those trying to get away from the chaotic cities of the province. In the Elder Scrolls novels we hear of several new villages being founded, like the village of Ione, the village of Sweetwater and the village of Eastbridge. Apparently many people left the cities during this chaotic period, and in addition to new villages being found, during this period small villages like Water's Edge, which we saw in Oblivion, also grew out to larger towns with the influx of new people from the city. Water's Edge specifically gets featured in the book, and we find out that it grew to a sizable port town for merchants who didn't really want to get stuck in the chaos in the then civil conflict between County Leowin and County Bravil, as Water's Edge had put itself on the map as a neutral port along the Niben River. We know that these smaller towns also had to make do with cheap building materials during this time of crisis, as many of them are described as cheap and mismatched in the Elder Scrolls novels. What this illustrates is that during the period of absent central rule, the individual counties and cities and towns were basically on their own, with Kvatch likely not faring much better. Trade would have likely been mostly absent because first of all Kvatch didn't really have anything left to trade with, and second of all Cyrodiil itself was in crisis with no strong central rule to speak of, likely leading to a poor economic situation all around, robbing the city of an influx of cash to make things better for themselves. Likely only after the year 17 of the 4th era, when Titus Mede I reconquered all of Cyrodiil and brought back central rule, bringing the provinces back in line, then trade would be possible once again across the empire. Perhaps during this time the new emperor may have also helped out Kvatch in order to strengthen it, since Cyrodiil is the base for his power and he would have needed it strong, especially after the emergence of the Thalmor and their conquest of Valenwood. I can't imagine the empire would have let Kvatch, which is quite close to the border with the Altmere Dominion, undefended and in a bad economic state, so I think past the year 17 there would have likely been a bit more influx of cash in Kvatch to get some repairs done. That said, the damage would have likely already been done by this point, as the very first 17 years of struggle would have left its mark on Kvatch, with a huge loss of population, and perhaps even famine in the Cyrodiilic Civil War years, and likely slow and chaotic repairs, grabbing any materials that they could get a hold of, leading to chaos within the city plan. This is why when I imagine Kvatch, I imagine a city filled with mismatched buildings of different build materials, with cheap repairs done to the existing structures that survived the Oblivion crisis, as the people of the city tried to make do with whatever they can get their hands on in this chaotic time. I imagine the city still full of ruins in the outskirts, because a large chunk of the population either died during the Oblivion crisis or left during the Chaos years. Because of these reasons, I think Kvatch is still likely one of the, if not the poorest city and county of Cyrodiil. Perhaps some of County Kvatch's lands even got taken by Anvil or Skingrad during the years of civil strife in Cyrodiil. But of course that, like most of this video, is speculation. But something that we do know for sure is, as some of the survivor NPCs said very well after the Oblivion crisis, the city may be rebuilt, but it will never be what it once was. And that's my little Kvatch speculation video. I know it's a bit different from usual, but recently I've been writing a little Elder Scrolls story which is set in Kvatch. Now that story is mostly my own headcanon, so it doesn't belong in lore videos like this one, but for it I had to speculate what Kvatch would be like after the Oblivion crisis, and I delved into the lore for, you know, getting a context in which to speculate, and I felt that some of you guys would enjoy my speculation within the existing context, so that's why I posted this. And if you didn't, well, next time there will be a regular lore video again, promised. That's it, that was today's video. If you enjoyed it, consider returning next time for the next Elder Scrolls lore video. And yeah, before I end things, allow me to thank my Patreon supporters and vocally thank my top Patreon supporters, Mr. Bernardo Binda, Gabriel Binda, Athena Heodis, Polarized Putin, Tsar Mikhail, Sword of Bushido, and Mr. Christmas. These amazing people, along with all the others on screen, keep this channel alive, and for that I am very grateful. That's it, I will see you all next time in the next Elder Scrolls lore video. Bye bye.